Welcome back to Lecture 5. This is the second video. In the previous video, we've covered needs-based approaches, Maslow's need hierarchy, McGregor's theory X and theory Y. In this video, we start to see Argylis. Like McGregor, Argylis also maintains that people have basic self-actualization trends. According to him, as plants reach their biological potential, people naturally grow their potential or capacity if they are not sick. And thus, under classical principles that employees are basically lazy and passive, healthy individuals will experience frustration, failure, and conflict between the needs of mature human personality and the needs of organization. And further, healthy individuals will come to desire relative independence, activeness, and use of their abilities. And finally, such desire will conflict with classical principles such as the narrow spans of control, clear chain of command, and unity of direction, and a narrow specialization. Therefore, Argylis suggests participative leadership and job enlargement for healthy individuals. To be more specific, Argylis tried to identify workers' ways to escape from frustration under classical principles. Since academic scholars couldn't have statistical analysis in this time, they identified this type of pattern of workers' behavior through observations. I personally believe that sometimes such qualitative analysis is more reliable than statistical hypothesis testing. Here, I just want to mention when you decide to escape from frustration in your workplace, you will choose these two options instead of just leaving your job. McGregor and Argylis maintain that self-actualization is basic needs of workers. If they are right, one question arises: what does self-actualization specifically mean? McClelland partially answers that question. He argues that there are three basic elements of workers' motivation: need for achievement, need for power, need for affiliation. First, he maintains that individuals have different levels of needs in each area, and then different combination of three needs will lead to diverse pattern of workers' behaviors. We've just covered needs-based approaches which identify human needs as a main element of workers' motivation. Although our textbook does not introduce another approach, recent studies take process-based approaches to motivation, where workers are creating their motivation in the process of making outcomes or achieving goals. In other words, it addresses how goals, values, or needs interact with other factors in determining motivation. It does not address what goals, values, or needs mean in terms of motivation. Firstly, I'd like to introduce expectancy theory as a process-based approach. It's saying that workers' motivation to take an action depends on the probability of good or bad outcome. In other words, the higher the probability of good outcomes and the lower the probability of bad one, the stronger the motivation to perform the action. So people will do what they see as most likely to result in. Please note that this theory is obviously affected by neoclassical economics, which assumes that people are self-interested and rational. For instance, theory assumes that workers can calculate the probability of good or bad outcomes. In this vein, the theory presents a negative aspect. Workers won't take too low risks or too high risks because they are rational and self-interested. Another example of process-based approach is Rock-Lassem's goal theory. They assume that people regulate their behavior in a way to achieve their goals. And further, they argue that specific and challenging goals lead to high performance, with three conditions. Feedback showing progress are provided. Appropriate task strategies are used. Individuals have adequate abilities. In this goals theory, workers will be motivated by others' feedback showing progress. On one hand, in expectancy theory, workers will be motivated by their own expectation of getting good outcomes. That is the main distinction between goals theory and expectancy theory. We've covered general theories of motivation beyond public-private distinction, but we should come back to the main topic of discourse, effects of publicness on motivation, values, or needs. As we learned in Lecture 1, existing theories suggest that, due to publicness, managers tend to be less materialistic and tend to be motivated to serve for the public. However, whether public officials have a kind of public spirit is still controversial. Before addressing that issue, I'd like to identify unique contexts of motivation in public organizations. For instance, the absence of economic markets in public good and service provision will result in diffuseness of incentives and performance indicators. Public workers should pursue diverse, conflicting, and sometimes ambiguous goals or values. The external oversight bodies such as legislative and judicial branches will affect structures, rules, and procedures in public organizations. Also, public opinions will be influential on the motivation of public officials. Based on these unique characteristics of public organizations, I will introduce the recent version of Theory X and Theory Y for public management. The recent version of Theory X in public management is Principal-Agent model, which comes from neoclassic economics. Thus, it assumes that people are rational and self-interested. Specifically, in public organizations, public officials cannot know which goals should be achieved or prioritized. Also, politicians, principals, cannot have much time to monitor each public official. Under such situation, since public officials are self-interested, they may start to use their working time for their happiness, such as hobby or leisure. In consequence, public officials become lazy. Based on this assumption, Principal-Agent model suggests that public agencies need to adapt contract-based employment rather than tenured employment, because contract-based employment allows public agencies to fire lazy public officials. And further, it argues that principals, such as heads of agencies or managers, must weave monitoring system and incentive structure into such contracts. Actually, economic theories of motivation focus on incentive structure to stimulate workers' motivation. So I might say this is a kind of incentive-based approach. The recent version of Theory Y in public management is Series of Public Service Motivation. We call it PSM. PSM assumes that public executives and managers tend to express a greater motivation to serve the public than the private counterpart. While many public administration scholars prove the existence of PSM, as we see, economists are still skeptical about this. In the early 90s, public administration scholars addressed what the main elements of PSM are, but recent studies call for incentive structure of PSM. Such studies suggest that public agencies need to seek intrinsic incentives which satisfies workers' own performance criteria such as professionalism, rather than extrinsic incentives such as money. But as you know, intrinsic incentives would be unseen and different from workers to workers. we haven't seen effective reward system for public service motivation. This is the end of lecture 5. Congratulations for your completing the half of the course. For the midterm exam, I recommend you to cover all the series in this lecture, and then you will get a good score. Good luck with your exam, and see you in the next lecture. Bye.